we will be understanding how to create an object. So in the last session, we have seen the only syntax of creating a class, syntax of creating a method. But what is the purpose of that constructor? What is the purpose of that method? How we are supposed to use that we understand only when you create an object. Now, what is this object? Try to get my point clearly. There are two types of variables what we have. One is primitive variable, another one is reference variable. One is primitive, another one is reference. Now, primitive means when I say integer, then primitive will store data. Primitive will store data. So, any variable created with a data type, primitive data type is a primitive variable. Any variable created with a primitive data type is a primitive. Look at the format. Now, I have this is the data. Now look at this. Data type, variable name, type of it. Data type, variable name, variable type. So, what is the data type here? Okay. Now, type of data type, is it a primitive or non-primitive? It is a primitive. Variable age. Now, any variable created with a primitive data type is a primitive variable. Then we had string. Now, data type is string. It is what? Primitive. Then we have name. Primitive. Why the data type is? The data type is what? The data type is primitive. Then I have taken account. Account is primitive? Account is what is primitive? Our primitive data types are what? What are the primitive data types we have? Boolean, block, integer, long, decimal, time, date time, ID. These are primitive data types. Any variable created with this data type, it is a primitive. Any variable created with the following data types is a primitive. So what was that? We had account. Now, what type of data type is this? Non-primitive. Then, what is the variable? AGC. What type of variable is this? Reference variable. Any variable created with any variable whose data type is non-primitive, they are called as reference variable. Contact CON. Contact, it is non-primitive. So, it is a reference variable. Then decimal amount, we had a decimal. It is what? Primitive. Now, amount is a primitive variable. Then we had Boolean flag. Boolean primitive. Now, it is reference or primitive. Data type is primitive. Primitive variable. Then we had a student. What is a student? Is it a primitive? Please mute your mics. Venkateshwar, mute your mic. Student, is it a non-primitive? Then here we are going to call reference. Now, variables are classified into two types of. One is a primitive variable, other one is a reference variable. Any variable created with a non-primitive data type is a reference variable. Any variable created with a primitive data type is a primitive variable. Then what is the difference between this primitive variable and reference variable? Primitive variables will store only data. Primitive variables will store data directly. So when I say primitive variables, look at this. I told here. Integer is equal to 10. String name. Primitive variables will hold data. But when you say reference variables, they store location where the data is stored. They will not store the data. They will tell the location where the data is stored. Now let us say locker 21. In the 21, my account number is there. I ask you, what is your account number? Go to locker number 21, open it, you find my account number. So if I say primitive, this is your account number. When I say reference, go to locker number 21, in that you find my account number. Then I told, what is your age? What is your age? Okay, go to Facebook profile, find my age. Now what was this? It is a reference. We are not straight away giving the value, we are telling where the value is available. Where the value is available. Then, first, it will tell the location where the data is stored. How do you create that location? First, you have to create a location. You have to put some data in the location. We will refer to that location. Now, create some location. Location is nothing but memory. Create some memory. Put the data in the memory. Refer that memory with reference variable. Reference variable will refer to the memory where the data is available. Reference variable will refer to the location where the data is available. Reference variable. It will refer to the location where my data is available. Reference variable. It will refer to the location where the data is available. Are you getting my point? Okay. Now, how do you create that location? We go with first. New. What is a new? New is a keyword which will allocate new memory. Which will allocate a new memory. Right. Once the memory is allocated, memory for data members. Which will allocate the memory for data members. All the reference variables are classes. All the reference variables, data type is class. Reference variables, data type will be what? Class. Now, student, it is a class. College, it is a class. Account, it is a class. Contact, it is a class. Okay. Now, new is the keyword which will allocate new memory for the data members. Data members of the class. Now look at the point. Try to get the point clearly. I had public class public public. I have not created a constructor. It is not necessary that every class will have constructor. If you want, you can create a constructor. If you don't want, you don't want. Depends upon the context. Now this class don't have any constructor. Then what happened? New I have here. The moment I say new, it is going to allocate memory. New created a new memory. In the memory, what are the members we have? Memory is created for data members. Age. Why null? Any variable created, and if you are not assigned the value, it is what? Null. Any memory allocated, you are not assigned the value, it is what? Null. Any memory is allocated, you are not assigned the value, it is what? Null. Now new created the memory, where I am assuming it is at some location called 600. Memory location 600. One memory was created. That memory was what? Age, null, name, null. When I say new, memory was created for the data members. Again I told you, whenever we use a word called new, new memory will be created. Whenever I say new memory will be created. Let us say it is at the address location of 800. So whenever I encounter a word called new memory is allocated. Okay. Now the question here is, you created a memory, very good, but boss, it is taking a default value called null. I don't want to have a default value. I want to take some initial value. Now don't take as a null. I want to give my initial value. Then what I will do? Here I'll give public example. They told age equal to 10. This is how I created. So when this constructor will run, new followed by constructor. So new followed by constructor. So once the memory is allocated, immediately what is happening, boss? Once the memory is allocated, immediately what is happening? Constructor is called. What the constructor is doing? Age equal to age equal to 10, name equal to. Again, new example. What is happening here? Memory is allocated and so what is the purpose of constructor? What is the purpose? It is initializing the values. If you don't initialize, what is the value we got? Null. What is the value we got? Null. I don't want to take a null. I want to assign some initial values. Now, after creating the new, immediately after the new, constructor is called. Constructor will be called only once while creating a object. Whenever you are creating an object, allocate the memory, immediately assign this value to the data members. Assign the memory, immediately allocate this value to the data members. Then you can use it. Create the memory, assign the values, then you can use it. I hope you're good. So this is called object. What is this called? Object. This is called object. New constructor is giving object. Now, how do you refer to this object? It is a location with some data. Now I have to refer to this. The location with the data is called object. Now how do you refer to this object? There is a reason we are creating a reference variable. Now it is a what type of memory location? Example. So E1 equal to. So what happened? Whatever the memory that was created here, that memory was referred by. Allocate the memory, run the constructor, then this is referred with. E1 is referring to this location. Then again, I told here. This memory location was referred by. So E1 object, okay, object is referred with E1. This object is referred with E2. Right? Are you clear? Are you clear? Right. So if you want to run any Apex class, it is a must. We have to create an object for it. If you want to run any Apex class, it is a must. We have to create an object for it. Right? So the object is what? Once the object is created. But how do you refer to that object? Create a variable which will refer to this object. Now, how do you create? If the class is example, example data type E1. If class is student, student E2. E2 will refer to that memory location. Are you clear? So E1 and E2 are basically what? Reference variables referring to the object which was created by the new keyword. Which was created by the new keyword. Am I clear with this? Am I clear with this? Now, this is referred with E1. If you want to refer to the data in this location, we are going to refer as E1 dot H. E1 dot. If you want to refer to this, E2 dot H. E2 dot. Have you got the point? Am I clear? So, whenever you want to execute any class, it is a must that we have to create an object. Class will not run. Class is only a template. If you want to run the class, you are supposed to create an object. If you want to create an object, we require a constructor. Now I told it is not necessary that every class will have a constructor. If you don't define any constructor, your system will create a dummy constructor. How it is going to create? Example. It is not necessary that every class will have a constructor. If you don't define any constructor, your compiler will automatically create one dummy constructor. Like this, it is going to create. So, it is not necessary that every class should have a constructor. In case if your class doesn't have a constructor, compiler will create a constructor. Why? If you want to create an object, new constructor. Constructor is a must to create an object. If you define, whatever you define, it will use. If you are not defined, system will create a default constructor and use it. I hope you are good with this. Am I clear? Am I clear? Am I clear with this? Okay. Now once again. Now let me give the diagram representation. Public class. Public. This is how I give. I'm giving public. Now I'm not taking any parameters. Okay. We'll see the drawback of it, then I'll go to parameters. This is how I create. So what we have here? New student. Okay. If you want to create an object, I'm creating it. Student. What was that? A variable called S1 is created with the data type called student. A variable called S1 is created with the data type called student. S1 is what type of variable? Primitive or reference? It is a reference variable. Now it will reference means what? It will refer to a location. Now S1 equal to new. Now the moment you say new, memory is allocated. For whom the memory is allocated? For the data members of the class. Last name, first name. This is how we got. Last name null, first name null, and field. Memory is allocated. Then once the memory is allocated, constructor will run. What the constructor is running? Student. Constructor says last name should be given as M. First name should be given as Kiran. Fee should be given as this. How we create. Now this memory is referred by. I told S1 equal to this. Now how do you refer to the members of this? System.debug S1 dot last name, S1 dot first name, S1 dot fees. Till here everybody is good? Okay. Let us go back. Now let me create it. File, new Apex class. File, new Apex class. File, new Apex class. Public string. Right. Now public then I was giving public. Okay. For your understanding also, I will also remove the public. String. Now what is this? Private, right? Public. The student, what I told? Last name. Then I was giving here now. I am using the data within the class only, right? If you are writing inside, where are we using the data? Within the class only we are using. Now last name, first name, age used within the class. Where can I use private members? Within the class. Anywhere within the class. That can be within the constructor, within the method. I have. Now you want to execute this. I only create a class. This will not run. This will not run. If you want to run, go to debug, execute, anonymous window. Then we are getting student std equal to new. Created a variable called std whose data type is student. That variable is referring to memory allocated by the new. Then click on, that is the execution. We create a class here, executed from anonymous. Then what is the value? Last name Evan, first name Ramesh, age is 40. I hope you are good with this, right, boss? So suppose I have not created any constructor. I am putting some comments here. No constructor. If there is no constructor, what will happen? Student, execute. What is the value we have? What is the value? Okay. Otherwise, I will try to do this. Remove it. I will put. I am not assigning any value in the constructor. If you don't assign any value in the constructor, debug, please with your mic, Sama. Then, if you don't assign any value, it is not necessary that constructor always assign. If you want to assign, we write in the constructor. One of the purpose of the constructor is to assign the values. What is the value we got? Null, null, null. So default values are there. You don't want to take a default value. You want to assign some value. We are assigning through constructor. I hope you are good with this. Right? Concept is clear? Now, concept is clear. Am I clear with this? Okay. Now just now I told, boss, we have created a class. We can create an object. How these members are referred? Object. What is that variable? STD. The STD is referring to an object. So that STD dot. Now tell me, where are we assigning this data? Within the class or outside the class? Am I calling this in the class or outside the class? It is outside the class. When you are calling outside the class, it throws error message. Private members are not visible outside the class. Now, whatever the variables you are creating, you want to use these variables only within the class. You can create them as a private. No, boss, this data should be used outside also. Then I have to put it as. Same program. Look at this. No issue. So you decide according to your requirement. We cannot give a global definition here. According to your requirement, if you want that variable to be used only within the class, make it as private. According to your requirement, if you want the variable to be used within the class, outside the class, defined as public. Outside the class using an object. Outside the class using a object. You want to use within the class, straight away we can use variables. If you want to use outside the class, create a object for the class, object dot variable name. Any variable, any data member of the class, you want to refer outside the class, we have to create object for the class, then we have to refer it. I hope you got my point. Am I clear with this? Am I clear? Anyone has any issue on that? Okay. Let us go.
Yeah, why?
Yeah, go ahead.
One question, because so always the constructor name should match with you are calling outside of the function, right? For
Yes.
example, just change student1, student parenthesis bracket 1.
It will be
Yeah, student 1.
It will be error.
Exactly. So it should always match, right?
That's what. Constructor is what? Always the name of the class.
Yeah.
Now.
Okay.
Right. Yes, Amma. Let me give some examples. Yeah. 1 minute.
Tell me like how we execute in the anonymous window.
Debug. Open execute anonymous window. Create a variable for the class. Variable equal to new. We can write in a single line, but to tell you that it's a variable, I split it into 2 lines. Class name, variable, or you can call it as an object equal to new constructor. So what is the syntax of creating? I'm creating the, let me create. So what was that object? It is a instance of syntax, class name, equal to new. So here we have new. It is a keyword. It is used to allocate memory for data members, constructor. Once the object is created, Once the object is created, constructor is automatically fired. Once the object is created, constructor is automatically fired and it will initialize data. Note, if the class doesn't have constructor, compiler will create dummy constructor. Then class this will be used as data type. This variable will refer to the instance of the memory created by all the data members of the class are accessed outside the class using all the data members of the class are accessed outside the class using object. Object dot is not only data members, we can say members. Syntax. Object name dot all the members of the class are referred outside the class using object. All the members of the class are referred outside the class using object.
Hi Satish.
Yes.
If you don't mention the data member type after object, just if you are just giving the object name, everything will be printed, or
No, unless you specify it, you do not print. You have to tell each and every action. System cannot perform any action.
okay.
Satish, can you please go back to the example once?
Yeah. 1 minute. Let the people copy. Right. People are done with this.
Satish, we don't specify any access modifiers for an object.
No.
Sorry. In this example, just can you, never mind, can you please, I mean, like I understood that the public student is constructor and class student is the class. And this constructor is defined under the class. That's fine. But how we can relate the method with this? Can you please explain one more time?
Yeah. No, method is different. Again, first let me finish off this story. Let us do
Sure,
some example of this. Right. So let us do some examples on this first. Right. See, it is a constructor, boss. How do you define a constructor? Now, what is the class name? Name of the class is student. How do you create a constructor? Let me give. Let us do this example. Create a class student with a constructor. First, do this example. Create a class student with a constructor. First, write a class student with a constructor. Write a class student with a constructor. Then how do you write it? Public class. What do you mean by constructor? Constructor is a method which will have same name of the class. What is the class name? Student. This also will be right. Create a class employee with a constructor. Create a class employee with a constructor. Create a class employee with a constructor. Create a class constructor. Create a class employee with a constructor. Public class employee. Public. Now, is it a mandatory that every class should have a constructor? Now let us see. Create a class product info. Create a class product info.
Can you use the constructor name as different than class name?
Now it become a constructor if the name is class. The method become a constructor if you give the same name of the class. If you give a different method, different name, it is a method. It's not a constructor.
Okay.
Now what was this? Class product info. Now I don't have any constructor. Now create a object for this. Create a object for the class. How do you create an object for the class? Student std equal to. Am I right? Now when you call new, what was that? Student. Once the memory is allocated, constructor will execute. Okay, constructor will execute. How many times the constructor will call? Only once. Now call this. What was that? Employee. Now, what happened? Once the memory is allocated, constructor will be filed. How many times the constructor is called? Only once. Now, how many times the constructor is called? Only once. Right. Similarly, for third one, create an object. For the third one, create an object. Then how do you create? Product info P equal to. Now, new product info. It is calling a constructor. But did you define any constructor? If you don't define a constructor, what happened? Compiler will create a dummy constructor. That's what I was trying to convey. Is that was clear? Somebody from online.
Yes, thank you, Satish.
Yeah, it's Satish. And another question. So suppose the constructor, you said like employee is there, employee one is there. Okay. Sorry, employee, public class employee, public employee.
Wait for a minute. Let me go step by step. Right. Now, if I start explaining it, it will go out of the box. Okay. Let me do one by one. Just let me do one by one. Now,
Okay.
create a class product info. Now, create a class employee with the name, age, create a constructor and assign values. Create a class employee with the name, age, create a constructor and assign the values of name, age. Create a object for it. Create a object for the class. Create a class with the data members, the constructor, create an object for it. So now what do you create? Public class employee. What are the data members we have to take in? String, public, string, public. Now I ask you to take a constructor. I ask you to take a constructor. Take a constructor and assign the values. Take a constructor and assign the values. Take a constructor and assign the values. Public, public employee, public employee. I told you to assign the values. You take your own values and assign it. You take your own values and assign it. So what is the value you are giving? Now we are giving a fixed value. Next I will take dynamic values. Okay. Then I ask you to create an object. How do you create an object? Employee EMP equal to employee EMP. Am I right? Am I right? Okay. Now what is the EMP dot name? Ravi. EMP dot age. Okay. Everyone is good with this, right, boss? Create a class. Create a class. Product info with name, price. Create a constructor.
So one question, sir. Here continuation. Sir.
Come again.
Sir, yeah, as you, hello, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
So as you mentioned, employee we are creating the object now, sir. Employee EMP, new employee.
Yes.
And for this integer age also, employee age equal to new employee we have to mention, sir. Next line.
Is equal to no. See.
Here we are creating the object.
Now only reference variables will be having a new keyword. Now what is the string name? It is a primitive variable. For using the primitive variable will directly refer to the value. Only for the class you create a new employee. You don't create a age equal to new age. Only for the class you create an object. That object dot name. Name is what? Primitive variable. Any primitive variable you want to use, no need of assigning memory. If you are referring to the if you are referring to the primitive variables, object dot primitive variable. Object dot primitive variable. Are you getting my point? Right. We don't create like this, boss. It is a part of the class. Age is a part of the class. You are creating an object for the class. Then how you are referring? EMP dot name. EMP dot age. Are they reference variable or primitive variables? Name and age is a primitive or reference? Name and age is a primitive. Primitive variables are directly referred. Primitive variables are directly referred. Only for reference variable, memory will be allocated. Right, boss? Now create a constructor, assign the values. Create a method. Print the values of create a object. Meet your mic, amma.
Sir.
Right. Now do this example. Yes. You have to make it public and test it. Now any variable you want to use outside the class, it should be a public. Now let me give. Let me create. file, new, product info. First point, if the class is private, accepted or not. What happened? Error. So it cannot be.
No,
It has to be a public.
cannot be.
Then I was giving here public string name. Okay. Integer, price, integer. Now public variable remaining to are private variables. Public product info is a constructor. Now is it called using in a class or outside the class? I am using that within the class only. Within the class means private variables can be used, protected variables can be used, public variables can be used, global variables can be used. Wherever we define in the same class, all variables can be used. This is what I told. The next one, what is the next one we had? Public void. I ask you to create a method. Constructor is assigning the value. I ask you to create a method and print the value. System dot debug. Now, if we are using within the class, directly we can use the variable. Within the class, we are using the variable. So, any query till now? Class, data member, constructor, method. Somebody from online has asked me the method. Look at the exam. Now, this was the structure. Now, I want to execute it. Go to anonymous window. If I write system.debug name, execute. Now it says which name? From which class? From which class? You said name. Name from a product or name from an employer, name from a student. Which class? Which class is that? So you cannot refer to the variable directly. So if you want to refer to any one of the variable of the class, first you are supposed to create object. Product info equal to.
Yeah, I got it, sir. I got it.
Right. Next, once you created this, then what happened? Object is created, then memory circle. Then I'm creating product dot. Let us say I'm giving product dot name equal to test. Now, is it using within the class or outside the class? Outside the class. So I give testing. Execute. No issue. Because if you want to use outside the class, it has to be public or global. Public or global. Then I'm using the same product dot. Then I'm giving. It is what? Price is what? Private. Now, if private, you cannot use the private members outside the class. Any member of the class you want to use outside, you have to create an object first. Object dot member. And the member should be what? Public or global. Got it now? I hope you're clear. Now, this is how it is. Now, finish. Let me finish. Now I created this. Now I'm giving product dot. It is a method. Method can be called n number of times. Method can be called n number of times. I can call the method n number of times. System.debug. Method can be called n number of times. Execute. So any member of the class you want to call, we are calling it. Now within the show, can I use name? Yes. It is within the class only, no. The variables are used within the class. If I try to call the variables directly outside the class, they should be public or global. Now I call show. Execute. You got here name, price, quantity. name, price, quantity, name, price, quantity. What was this? Method can be called any number of times that you want, but constructor can be called only once. Constructor will be executing only once. Method can be called any number of times. Constructor is basically what? Initialization. Before you start using the object, you want to assign any initial values, then we go for constructor. Constructor will be used only once at the time of creating an object. Method will be called any number of times. Method will be called any number of times. I hope you are good. Am I clear? Am I clear with this? People have followed? Any query on this now?
Yes. Sir, here after execution this public string name and private integer price, sir. Can you please show the difference, sir? How the program it will be executed?
I didn't get you.
Here we are given public string name
Okay.
and private in the integer price.
Okay.
All right, sir.
Private for the integer.
So what's the difference of this? If I mention public also, it will be execute the same
just now I
programming.
shown one example here. System.debug. I told product.name. Now the difference of access modifier will be there only when you are trying to access outside. Now I told name. Now I am trying to print here system.debug product.price. Now execute it. What happened here? Price is not visible. Why it is not visible? Because it is a private. If you define it as a private, it cannot be used outside. But within the methods we can use it. Now, access modifier say whether we can call outside or not. It is not going to impact your logic. It is only going to say, can I use this variable in the class, outside the class? Can I call this variable within the class, outside the class is only the question. It is not going to impact the logic. Logic is defined within the function. Where is the function? Within the class only. I hope you are good. Access modifiers will tell only whether the variable can be called outside the class or not. Apart from that, there is no impact of this. I hope I am clear. Right, Aman?
Sir.
So
Satish.
Yeah. Make it fast.
Hello, Satish. Yeah, if in the show method, if you don't give public, it can't be accessed,
Now,
right?
if it's not a public, then it will become what? Private. If it's a private, can we call it? It throws error message.
No.
So anything,
And
any member of the class you want to call outside, it should be any member of the class you want to call outside, any member of the class you want to call outside. It's not saved. Any member of the class you want to call outside, it has to be public or global. Any variable or method you want to call outside the class, it has to be either public or global. Now what happened? Method is not. Now the purpose of the access modifier is to tell the same boss. Now can I call it outside or not is the question mark. If you want to use this class in some other class, you want to use this class in some other class, you want to use this class somewhere else, can I use it or not is the question. Class is available, but the members of the class is available or not. How do you know? Depends upon their access modifiers. Okay. Any other query?
Yes, Satish.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Satish, whatever we are doing in an anonymous window, it's related to this class. We are creating an object. So it will consider as outside the class?
Obviously. Now, within the class means what? Are you writing anything within this classroom? Look at this. Within the class means what? Are you writing within the class?
No.
Right? Then how does I know this belongs to this class? Now, there are 100 classes, boss. Serial register. Right. Now look at this. Product info. Now there are not only product info, there are 1,000 classes are there. Now where are you going to execute? Now are we executing the program from the same class? I open another window, I am executing. This is a different story. So if you define anything within a flower bracket, it is called within the class. Anything that you define within this flower bracket is called within the class. Right? If you are trying to access outside this flower bracket, it is outside the class. Right, boss?
Okay.
Right. Every class is independent. Yeah, come again.
if we will execute it from here, then no need.
not
If
execute.
it's public.
You are supposed to execute from anonymous window. Right.
Okay.
Now, if you define here, it's called template. See, class is defined separately, execution is done separately. Execution and class both will not be done in same location. You are defining the class separately. Class is what? Template. Now, just like a registration form was. I created a registration form. When I am creating a registration formula, I am going to enter the data. No, right? I will give this data to student. When I give to the student, student will write. Okay, I only will not create. Like say you came for inquiry, I will not take a registration form. I will enter your data, everything, and say this is your registration form. Right? I will give you a form. You have to fill it. You are outside. Class definition is defined separately. Execution is different separately. Both will not be at the same location. Definition of the class is different. Execution is different. Definition of the class is different. Execution is different. What was this? What you are finding on the screen? It is a class definition. If you want to execute, you have to create an object. Where will you create this object? Anonymous window. I hope you are good.
And
Running the program from a different window. It's
Yeah.
So it's not like we can create object in this class only.
For this class, you will not be creating. Now see.
How do you save that object, Satish?
Now see. Let me make it a few points. The class what we created in the real time, you will not execute from anonymous window. The class what you are using, you will call from a page. The class what we are calling will use in a trigger. The class what we are created will use in another class. Right? That is the practical way of executions. But here we just started a topic called class. Now you want to know how it executes. There is a reason I am executing from anonymous window. What my point? When you get into the Salesforce, how will you call this class? You call this class in a Visual Force page. You call this class in a Lightning component. You call this class in a trigger. You call this class in a another effects class. Right? But now we are at the beginning of understanding what is a class, how the class executes. To show the execution, we are using the anonymous and showing you the format.
And Satish, it cannot be more than one class in one page. This one, right?
There will be only one class for one effects. Only one effects class I can create. Only one effects class I can create in the program. Every program will have only one effects. This is a effects class product info. If I want one more, you have to create separately. Every class is independent here. Every class is independent here. Right. Any other queries?
Yeah.
Satish, how many objects will have for a single class in a real-time scenario?
See, there will be no limitation on that. He has a question, how many objects can be created? There will be no limitation on it. Depends upon the requirement I have to create. Now I have a requirement of creating 1000. If you say only 500, how will I implement? The purpose of coming for development, what is the purpose of coming for development? Whatever the limitations are there, we want to overcome it. That is the purpose of going for a development basically. Right, Itama? So there is no limitation on how many objects you can create. Right. Any other queries from the classroom?
So Satish, as you said, it will not create a constructor. System will create a dummy constructor.
Yeah.
Right? So then what's the need to create a constructor if system will create already?
See, now, when system create a dummy constructor, what it is doing? Is it writing a logic?
it's only null values.
What you are trying to do? You want to build some logic. When you want to build a logic, you are writing a constructor. You don't want to write any logic. System will create a dummy and say nothing is done.
Okay.
Right. See, now. Right. Okay. Any other? Chalo.
Satish, one more thing. We need object just to execute the class.
Exactly.
Anything else? Okay.
Exactly.
Can you please go to the running screen, the other screen where you have run this program?
Right. Now, right. Online people, you can ask your question at the end. Other people are sitting the idle here. The questions are not audible to these people. Right. Any other? Make it fast online. This is one of the reasons why I block the questions in between the session.
Satish, can you please explain the access modifier where exactly in the program location?
Boss, sir. I repeated a number of times. Access modifier, data type, variable. There is nothing else to write here. Any variable you write, you will be writing an access modifier for a class, access modifier, class name. Access modifier, data type, okay, variable name. Access modifier, method, okay, data type, method name. Now, if you want to call within the class only, you can define it as private. You want to use outside the class, you have to give define as public or global. As simple as that. Now you are using a class. Now whatever the variables you are creating, where you want to use, only within this class, outside the class also. You want to use outside the class also, make it a public or a global. Right. Now where we can use, you have to tell me now. Depends upon your requirement. Now I told, whenever you want to use outside the class, you have to use it. Now if your requirement says you have to use it outside, you have to define public. Your requirement says only within the class, you will make it private. Are you getting? Right. Now a definition we can give. Now for every class it will not be a public, for every class it will not be a private. Depends upon the requirement, we have to take a call. Depends upon the requirement, you have to take a decision to create a public or private. I hope you got my point. 90% we go with the public. I
Yes,
hope
sir. Thank you.
Yeah, right. Any other query, Amma? Any other query?
So Satish, here we are using.
1 minute. 1 minute only. 1 minute. In the Salesforce, see, now administration you have created an object. In the administration, whatever the object you have created, that object in the programming we call it as S object. Whatever the table you have created in the administration, that in the programming we call it as S object, because there is a conflict of name. Now this is an object for a class. There is an object in database. In the administration, whatever the tables you created, account, contact, there is an object in database. And this is a object for a class. To remove the conflict, the tables what you created in administration, in the programming we are going to call S object. Okay, again, still, you have to go further. Okay. Now, see, the point is, people want to learn everything in one class. That is the problem. Right. Okay. Any query on this now? Yeah, someone from online. Yeah, go ahead. What is the query?
I had the same question, Satish. Okay, I'm clear. Yeah.
Now, let us do this example now. Create a Apex class. Employee with name, salary, experience. Create a class employee with name, salary, experience, bonus. Create a constructor and assign the values. Create a method, assign the values of name, experience. Create a method, calculate, which will calculate salary. Create a method, calculate, which will calculate salary, bonus. If experience is more than 5, create a object and print the value. Now, in the requirement, where I am printing the value? I told create an object and print the value. So I am printing the value outside the class. Now I am printing the value outside the class. As per this requirement, your variable should be what? Public. Why? I am trying to use this variable outside the class with the object. My requirement says print the value using object. If you want to print the value using object, we are printing it outside. So the member should be public. This how depends upon the requirement. You need to take a call whether they are public or private. But 90% of the cases our data will be public. I hope. Am I clear? Somebody from online? Is that was clear? Now do this example. Still anyone has any other query? Let me know, boss.
So Satish, I have one question.
Yeah,
So suppose in the previous example, I mean this example also, you are using one set of data, right? So, but for the programming, I mean like 100% sure that we don't use the real-time data directly in the programming. So you will connect it to database and use this in future classes.
yes,
Is that correct?
yes.
Okay, but you don't use any data from the administrator. I mean like tables, like objects.
Any table that is there in the administration, you have to write a query and fetch it up.
So in the real time, does the people like create the data from the admin and use it in the programming or
Exactly.
directly?
Exactly. Now it can be in both versions. The data which is existing, we can call it, or you can create the data and use it. In some of the context, I want to get the data and use it. In some of the context, I want to create a new data and use it. Both possibilities are there, right?
Yeah, but is it the better way to use from admin objects or from database?
The same thing I'm saying was, in the administration, that is a database table. This object is different. There's no similarity between this and the table.
Yeah. This is not the S object or something.
Yeah. Next one. Now whether you are going to use the existing data or print the data depends upon requirement. Now you want to display existing data. Then what do? You are supposed to get the data from database. You want to modify order of the records. You need to get the data from database and modify. You want to delete the records. You have to get the data from database and delete it. Now you want to create an opportunity programmatically. You have to create a new one. You want to insert a new lead. Programmatically you are inserting it. What my point? So depends upon the context we will decide. We cannot give a statement. Only existing data will be fetched always. New data will be fetched, which is good practice. It is not a format. It depends upon your requirement, what we are trying to implement.
So, okay, then, so whatever objects are created in the admin side and also whatever the data is created in S object, both will be stored in the same database. Is that correct?
Administration, whatever you're calling as objects, same thing we are calling as S object. Both are same
okay,
table.
same data.
Now here you're calling account here, account object. In the programming, I will call it as account S object. That's all. Okay. Now it's too early to discuss these points.
Okay. And other question, like whatever we discussed so far, that we are using dot, right? Suppose ACC dot name. Is that called aliasing or is that any other name?
No, don't use any special terms. Right. It's a reference case.
Okay.
Now, so what we have here? See, I'll make a point here very clear. Here, when I say object, don't refer to this object as a table in the database. Okay, it is an instance of a class. It has nothing to do with tables in the database. It is an instance of a class. Forget your administration. It is a new. The definition of object is different here. Don't try to compare this object with the administration objects. Okay. Now, in the administration, what are you created? I'm calling them as tables now. The object, when I say object, is a instance of a class. No connection between table in administration and this. So what I'm doing? Public class employee, public string, public decimal, bonus, experience, then I told you to create. Okay. Then I ask you to create constructor. In the constructor, I'm not asking you to assign every value. I'm asking you to assign the values of only. Then I'm asking to give experience. Then I was trying to give void and I'm told if experience is greater than 5, Yeah. This is what I did. Am I right? Now I ask you to create an object. MP equal to new MP. Now you want to calculate the salary and bonus. If you want to calculate, then call emp dot so that salary and bonus will be calculated. Then I am asking you to print
The data type spelling is mistake. Just in case.
there. Print other values here. Now I am calling outside the class, right? emp dot name. That is the reason the variable is defined as, right? Print the remaining data. I hope I am good with this, right? That's all from my end. So anyone has any further queries on this classroom? Are you comfortable with this topic? Right? Okay.